Once upon a time, there was a man who had everything, but owned nothing. Arthur King looked down at Manhattan from his $20 million penthouse, but he couldn't see himself. The millionaire who ruled an empire with an iron fist didn't know he was about to learn the most valuable lesson of his life, not in the boardroom, but from the calloused hands of a former employee he himself had fired. In this true story of redemption and humanity, you will discover how the richest man became the poorest, only to find his true wealth in the most unexpected place. Prepare to witness a thrilling paradox. The one who lost everything gained everything, and the one considered inferior became the only light in the darkness. Here lies a truth that defies the logic of success. Sometimes we need to lose everything to find our true selves. And the most surprising thing? The person we least expect can show us the way back home, back to ourselves. The Manhattan sun was beginning to paint the skyscrapers gold, but Arthur didn't even notice. High up in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, he was immersed in the cold spreadsheets on his laptop, sipping Ethiopian coffee that cost more than many people's lunch. Everything in that environment screamed luxury and success, from the imported furniture to the deafening silence that only money can buy. He wore a tailored suit, but that cashmere armor couldn't hide the emptiness growing inside him, a silent echo amidst so many numbers and graphs. He had everything he ever thought he wanted, the most coveted view in New York, cars in the garage, and a bank account that looked like a phone number. But there, in that golden solitude, he found himself looking at the little boats on the park's lake, remembering a time when happiness fit into a simple smile. Life had become a succession of meetings and goals, and that boy who dreamed of changing the world now only changed versions on his investment app. The bitter taste of the coffee mingled with the taste of an achievement that suddenly seemed empty. Each click of the mouse, each profit projection, was another brick in a wall separating him from the real world. He handled the numbers with the dexterity of a surgeon, but he was incapable of taking his own emotional pulse. The city pulsed below, full of life, dramas, and simple joys, while he was trapped in a glass dome, impervious to feelings. Wealth had given him comfort, but it had stolen contact, genuine exchange, the human warmth that has no price tag. And so began another day in Arthur King's life, perfect, immaculate, and profoundly lonely. The question he dared not ask echoed in that silent void. Was this, then, what victory was? The empire he had built with his own hands now resembled more of a high-class prison, where the jailer and the prisoner were one and the same. And worst of all, that morning, as on so many others, he had no idea how to escape. There was a time when Arthur wasn't just a name on a bronze plaque. In his mind, the image of the boy he was in Chicago would sometimes come to mind, repairing bicycles in his father's garage and dreaming of creating a company that would be good for people. That boy believed, with an open heart, that business could be a force for good, a tool to generate opportunities and improve the community around him. Profit was just a means, never the absolute end of that journey full of hope and purpose. But the road to success is full of dangerous curves. As his startup grew, investors demanded higher returns, competitors became more aggressive, and the pressure for quarterly results became the only metric that mattered. Gradually, that idealism was buried under an avalanche of spreadsheets, projections, and agreements that demanded ever greater concessions. The company that was born to make a difference now only worried about making money, and Arthur became the main architect of this transformation. He remembered the exact moment he buried his youthful dream. It was during a crucial meeting, when he chose to cut an employee benefits program to increase shareholder dividends. That day, he closed his eyes for a second, swallowed hard, and signed the document that buried the values of that boy from Chicago. Ambition, that companion that had once driven him, had become a serpent devouring its own tail, suffocating any glimmer of idealism that still tried to survive. And so, year after year, Arthur drifted further away from the person he once promised to be. The successful businessman the world saw was an empty shell, a ghost inhabiting the body of the one who once dreamed of being an agent of transformation. With each new acquisition, with each new record on the stock market, he felt more distant from himself, as if he were watching his own life from afar, unable to recognize the protagonist of that story. His life was like a luxurious Swiss watch, punctual, predictable, and incredibly empty. Every morning, his driver awaited him in the same place. Every night, he dined at the trendiest restaurants in Manhattan, surrounded by people who laughed at his jokes not because they were funny, but because he was rich. Arthur's relationships were transactions disguised as friendships, where affection was traded for influence, contacts, or favors. He was always accompanied, but loneliness was his most faithful shadow. Even his romantic encounters followed the same superficial logic. The women he met were more interested in appearing on the cover of a magazine as Arthur King's new girlfriend than in getting to know the man behind the empire. Conversations revolved around exotic trips, expensive brands, and charity events that benefited the egos of the participants more than the causes supposedly defended. No one asked how he really was. No one cared about his fears or dreams. Those were luxuries that even Arthur's money couldn't buy. The routine was a perfect trap. Waking up early, working out with the personal trainer, going to the office, having lunch with partners, having dinner with clients, repeating. The days merged into an endless sequence of commitments that filled his time but emptied his soul. The gilded cage was so comfortable that he didn't even understand the bars, and the imported birdseed knew it so well that he forgot that deep down he was a bird that never flew of his own accord. And so Arthur continued, navigating from social event to social event, from meeting to meeting, never truly connecting with anyone, much less with himself. The financial security he had fought so hard to build had become his own prison, and the cruelest irony was that he had all the keys to free himself, but had forgotten how to use them. The emptiness whispered his name in the sleepless nights, but the noise of parties and business always drowned out its call. That night, the ballroom of a 5-star Beverly Hills hotel was packed with Los Angeles elite, all donning their masks of benevolence for a charity auction. Arthur circulated among the guests, greeting people with smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes, exchanging business cards disguised as small talk. The champagne was French, the canapés were organic, but the generosity in the air had an artificial flavor, like something staged for the social cameras. Each $1 million bid on a painting was announced with calculated applause, more of a trophy for the ego than a gesture of genuine compassion. Amidst that charade of vanities, Arthur paused for a moment to observe the scene. Women vying to see who wore the most expensive jewelry. Men comparing yachts, all using a noble cause as a backdrop for their displays of status. He himself had made an absurd bid on a hideous sculpture, not because he appreciated the art, but because a business rival was also interested. Suddenly, the farce of that evening seemed unbearable, and he felt a lump in his throat, a pang of shame for participating in that charade. It was then that an elderly lady, one of the few genuine volunteers at the event, approached him with teary eyes and thanked him for the generous donation. She recounted in an emotional voice how that money would transform the lives of dozens of homeless families. Arthur looked at the woman's calloused hands, at her sincere smile, and felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. In that brief moment, a painful truth crossed his mind. That lady, in her simple coat, was infinitely richer than he would ever be. The moment of clarity was like a bolt from the blue, intense, revealing, and frighteningly fleeting. Before he could process what he was feeling, a senior partner tugged at his arm to introduce him to someone he needed to meet, and Arthur was dragged back into the whirlwind of superficiality. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and even enveloped in velvet and champagne, he could no longer completely ignore the echo of that nagging question. What, after all, was the true purpose of it all? In the rare moments of silence, when the lights of New York flickered outside his apartment, an ancient fear gripped Arthur. It was the paralyzing dread that everything he had built was a house of cards about to collapse with the first strong wind. He saw himself as an imposter who had managed to deceive everyone, wearing the guise of a successful tycoon, but who would be unmasked at any moment. This secret dread was his closest companion, the whisper in the darkness that tainted every victory with the shadow of failure. This imposter syndrome manifested itself in subtle but constant ways. In meetings, when everyone agreed with his ideas, he wondered if they were merely flattering him out of fear or self-interest. In record profit reports, he searched for hidden errors, convincing himself that the numbers concealed a catastrophic flaw he wasn't competent enough to see. Even praise in interviews sounded like accusations to his ears, and he constantly prepared for the day someone would point a finger and shout fraud for the whole world to hear. Vulnerability was completely foreign territory to Arthur. Since losing his parents at a young age, he had learned to bury his pain under layers of success and material achievements. To him, showing weakness was tantamount to signing his death warrant in the business world. Therefore, he kept everyone at a safe distance, creating a fortress around his insecurities. The price of this emotional armor was the profound loneliness of someone who could never truly be seen or understood. And so he continued, navigating between two twin fears: the fear of losing everything he had built, and the even greater fear that, if he did lose it, he would discover that there was nothing real behind the millionaire facade. The possibility of having to face his own fragile humanity without the crutches of status and wealth was terrifying. Unknowingly, he was preparing for a fall he already considered inevitable, praying that, when the moment came, he would have enough courage to face the abyss. The storm arrived on an ordinary Tuesday in the form of a formal announcement from the SEC, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. A surprise audit would be conducted on Arthur's company's accounts, following anonymous allegations of accounting irregularities. The tycoon's world spun violently, but he still tried to cling to his arrogance. Certain that his systems were foolproof, in the first few days, he treated the auditors with calculated coldness, offering the bare minimum of cooperation, convinced it was just a bureaucratic misunderstanding. The reality began to crumble when auditors identified a series of suspicious transfers to offshore accounts, all made through a department that Arthur had neglected in recent years. To his utter horror, the transactions coincided with a period of aggressive company expansion, when he had delegated crucial controls to subordinates he trusted blindly. The hole was deep. Millions of dollars evaporated while he was distracted cutting ribbons at inaugurations and posing for business magazines. The hardest blow came when the audit team introduced their expert external consultant, Sofia Mendez. Arthur could hardly believe his eyes when he saw her enter the meeting room, standing tall and with an unblinking gaze. Sofia had been his chief accountant years before, one of the brightest minds who had ever worked for him, until he unfairly fired her after she questioned certain financial practices he considered dangerous ethical boundaries. At the time, Arthur accused her of being too cautious, of hindering his growth. Now there they were, on opposite sides of the table. Sofia showed no resentment, only cold professionalism, but every word she uttered about the inconsistencies in the accounts sounded like a moral judgment. Arthur felt his face burn with a mixture of anger and shame as he watched the woman he had dismissed explain, with ruthless clarity, how her unbridled ambition and carelessness had created the perfect conditions for disaster. The empire he feared was a fraud was in fact crumbling, and ironically, the only person who seemed capable of understanding the complete puzzle was the one he himself had pushed away. The report leaked to the press even before the official conclusion. Suddenly, Arthur saw his life become headline news in major financial newspapers. The word fraud was emblazoned in bold, his photo next to charts showing the free fall of stocks. Reporters crowded the entrance of his building, and his phones rang non-stop with hysterical investors. He watched from inside the armored car, motionless, as journalists shouted their questions like accusations. For the first time in years, he tasted the bitter flavor of genuine panic. It was no longer vague anxiety, but a concrete terror that tightened his chest and made breathing difficult. His name, so carefully crafted, was being dragged through the mud in real time. His friends vanished as if by magic. The phone that had once never stopped ringing was now deathly silent, except for calls from his lawyer. The high society that had so often abused him now treated him like an outcast, a patient zero who needed to be isolated. His social media was flooded with cruel comments, and he had the nauseating realization that he was completely alone. It was the point of no return. The reputation he had spent a lifetime building had crumbled in a matter of hours. Arthur locked himself in his apartment, the blinds drawn, the outside world now hostile. The once powerful millionaire was cornered, facing the harsh truth that some falls are so high that there is no way to get up unscathed. Arthur's first reaction upon seeing Sofia was pure rage. How dare she appear now, in the worst crisis of his life, with an air of moral superiority. He received her in his office, still decorated with trophies from his past conquests, trying to project a strength he no longer felt. "I don't need your help," he said coldly, his trembling hands hidden in his pockets. Sofia remained calm, offering not only her accounting expertise, but a strategic way out of the disaster. She spoke of recovery, of rebuilding, but Arthur heard only the echo of his own humiliation. Accepting her help would mean admitting he was wrong in firing him, that his judgment had failed, something his wounded pride wouldn't allow. He interrupted her rudely, citing her impressive resume and powerful network of contacts. "I have better people to help me," he lied, knowing that none of the best were answering his calls. Sofia's previous position as his subordinate created an insurmountable barrier in his mind. Accepting help from someone he considered inferior was an intolerable affront to his ego. When Sofia left, leaving a written proposal on the table, Arthur tore it to shreds. He stared at the paper fragments on the floor as if destroying the very evidence of his vulnerability. The man who had lost almost everything still clung desperately to the last vestige of his pride, not realizing that this was precisely what was preventing him from saving himself. The reality became impossible to ignore when the banks began freezing their lines of credit. Arthur spent the night reviewing numbers that only worsened. The spreadsheets that once showed astronomical profits now painted a picture of imminent ruin. Without access to new funds, he wouldn't even be able to pay the essential employees he still had left. It was then that, with trembling hands, he gathered the pieces of Sofia's torn proposal and meticulously glued them back together like a desperate man. Each fragment of paper was a piece of his pride being humbly retrieved. Rereading her words, he saw that she wasn't offering revenge, but a sensible, almost compassionate plan to save what could still be saved. The call was the hardest of his life. "Sofia," his voice faltered, and he had to swallow hard before continuing. "I need your help." The words came out as a hoarse whisper, each one costing him a piece of his self-esteem. On the other end, the brief silence seemed eternal before she agreed to meet him the next day. When he hung up, Arthur felt strangely light, as if he had released a weight he had been carrying for a long time. The humiliating journey began there, in that empty apartment, with a broke millionaire asking for help from the woman he had fired. For the first time, instead of pride, he felt something akin to hope, fragile as glass, but real. In the early days of their forced partnership, Arthur questioned Sofia's every move. He meticulously reviewed her calculations, searching for errors or signs that she might be sabotaging her already fragile recovery process. "Are you sure about these numbers?" he constantly asked, his skepticism hanging in the air like a thick fog between them. Sofia worked with almost supernatural patience, repeatedly explaining her strategies without losing her composure. She presented meticulous plans to renegotiate debts, sell non-essential assets, and structure a new business model. But Arthur only saw hidden possibilities for revenge, convinced that no one would be so generous after having been treated as she had been. Distrust reached its peak when Sofia suggested that he personally negotiate with a former creditor. "Is this a trap?" he questioned, his eyes narrowed. "Do you want to see me humiliated in public?" Sofia merely sighed wearily and replied that humility, not humiliation, was the only possible path to his redemption. Arthur spent sleepless nights tossing and turning in bed, imagining possible scenarios of betrayal. He obsessively checked financial transactions, searching for any sign that would confirm his suspicions. Paranoia had become his new companion, feeding on the wreckage of his former arrogance. Contrary to Sofia's cautious advice, Arthur decided to make a risky investment in cryptocurrencies. Driven by the panic of seeing his assets dwindle even further, he liquidated what remained of his most stable assets and plunged headlong into the volatile market. "Sometimes you need courage to change the game," he justified, closing his eyes to the obvious risks. Sofia tried to warn him about excessive speculation, showing him historical charts and expert analyses that predicted an imminent correction. But Arthur, used to being in charge, didn't listen. The idea of a slow and gradual recovery seemed unbearable to someone accustomed to explosive gains. The anxiety for quick results outweighed reason. The fall was brutal and almost instantaneous. In a matter of days, an unexpected regulatory change caused the market to plummet, evaporating what remained of Arthur's investment. He watched, paralyzed, as the numbers fell in real time, a digital hemorrhage that represented his last financial hope. The blow left him virtually penniless. Sitting on the floor of his empty office, Arthur stared at the computer screen as if reading his own financial obituary. The debt was now an insurmountable mountain, and this failure confirmed his worst fears. Perhaps he really knew nothing about business. Perhaps his previous success had been just a stroke of luck. The darkness of despair was beginning to engulf him. Being evicted from his Manhattan penthouse was the final blow. Arthur packed a few suitcases with personal belongings, while real estate agents oversaw the removal of his luxurious furniture. Each object that left through the door seemed to take a piece of his identity with it. Without his tailored suit, without his expensive wristwatch, without his Italian shoes, he felt naked, exposed. He settled into a rented room in Brooklyn, a space so small it could barely accommodate a bed and a desk. The silence was different from that of his penthouse. not the luxurious silence of purchased privacy, but the empty silence of imposed solitude. For the first time in decades, he had no assistants, drivers, or cooks. He was completely alone. Looking at himself in the tiny bathroom mirror, Arthur didn't recognize the man he saw reflected. His eyes were tired, his hair disheveled, his simple clothes seemed to belong to a stranger. Who was he without the credentials he had always used as a crutch? Without the printed business card, without the prestigious address, without the power to make people perk up when he entered a room? The question echoed in his mind as he settled into the narrow bed. If he was no longer Arthur King, the successful tycoon, then who the hell was left? Wealth hadn't just been his possessions, it had been his personality, his reason for being, the lens through which he saw the world and through which the world saw him. Without it, he felt like a ghost, insubstantial and forgotten. One by one, the phones stopped ringing. The messages ceased. Invitations to dinners, events, and meetings evaporated as if they had never existed. Arthur began seeing photos on social media of old friends at parties and fancy restaurants, the same places he used to frequent. But now, without him, they were like ghosts from a past life, and he was the forgotten ghost. Loneliness hit harder on Sunday nights, when the city seemed to slow down and families gathered. He walked through the streets of Brooklyn, watching through the illuminated windows people dining together, laughing, living. These normal scenes hurt more than any financial loss, because they revealed a poverty that went far beyond money. The most brutal moment was when he encountered a former business partner in a simple cafe. The man, who months earlier had insisted that Arthur meet his daughter, now looked away and left quickly, as if he had seen a leper. The rejection was so physical that Arthur felt a knot in his stomach, understanding that, for that society, he had ceased to exist. It was in this forced isolation that Arthur began to understand the transient nature of loyalties based on self-interest. His friends weren't bad people. They were merely products of the same system he himself had fostered, where a man's worth was measured by his bank account. Now, without monetary value, he was discovering who he truly was, a stranger to everyone, including himself. With his passport in hand and a half-closed suitcase on the floor, Arthur contemplated the possibility of disappearing. A contact had offered him an escape route to the Caribbean, where he could live with what little he had left, far from his creditors and the scandal. The idea was seductive, to start over where no one knew his story of failure. He stared at the computer screen, where an e-ticket to the Cayman Islands flashed, awaiting his confirmation. All he had to do was click buy, and that same night he would be on a plane heading towards anonymity. Sofia's promise to rebuild her life seemed naive in the face of the ease of escape. Why face humiliation when it could be avoided? But then he remembered the commitment he had made to Sofia, the promise to face the consequences together. He imagined her arriving the next day to find him missing, once again disappointed by his cowardly choices. The image of her expression was more powerful than any fear of the creditors. It was the face of the person who had believed in him when no one else did. With trembling hands, Arthur canceled his flight reservation and closed his suitcase. The decision brought a strange peace, as if he had finally chosen to face a storm instead of running to hide from it. For the first time, responsibility outweighed fear, and he understood that some escapes cost the soul, even when they saved the body. The night arrived cold and damp, and Arthur discovered he didn't even have enough money for a sandwich. Sitting on the floor of his rented room, he counted the coins left in his pocket, less than $5. Hunger mingled with despair, creating an existential nausea that rose in his throat. This was rock bottom, deeper than he had ever imagined possible. He opened the window and looked out at the busy street 9 stories below. The people looked like ants, their lives insignificant and yet so desirable in their normality. For the first time, the idea of suicide arose not as a drama, but as a logical solution. No money, no friends, no future. What point was there in continuing? The relief of the end seemed tempting. That's when he saw Sofia arriving home from work, carrying grocery bags. She looked up, as if she knew he would be there at the window, and waved with a tired smile. The simple ordinariness of that gesture shattered his gloomy thoughts. Someone still cared enough to notice his presence, to remember that he existed. Arthur closed the window with trembling hands, ashamed of having considered that a cowardly way out. As the tears finally came, he understood that hitting rock bottom had a purpose. It was the only place from which you could begin to climb. The darkness was still there, but now there was a glimpse of something more. the stubborn resilience of someone who decides it's not over yet. Arthur watched Sofia working at the small kitchen table, her nimble fingers dancing across the laptop as she analyzed complex financial reports. There was a quiet determination in her eyes, a strength that didn't depend on status or wealth, but on character. She worked tirelessly, not out of obligation, but out of some inner principle that Arthur had long forgotten. He noticed how she worked miracles on a minimal budget, planning every dollar with surgical precision. While he wallowed in self-pity, Sofia found creative solutions, made connections, negotiated deadlines, all with a dignity that impressed Arthur. Her resilience wasn't loud or dramatic, but steady like the tide, slowly washing away his doubts and fears. In a simple gesture that deeply touched Arthur, Sofia shared her dinner with him, a modest sandwich she had brought, without making a fuss or showing pity. "We need to keep our strength up," she said casually, as if sharing one's last meal were the most common act in the world. At that moment, Arthur understood that true wealth wasn't in what you had, but in what you could offer even when you had little. Watching Sofia, Arthur began to understand that his own strength had always depended on external factors: money, power, influence. Her strength came from within, forged in battles he had never had to face. For the first time, he saw no humiliation in learning from someone he had considered inferior, but privilege in witnessing true courage in action. On a rainy Saturday, while helping an elderly neighbor fix a broken chair, Arthur found his hands remembering long-forgotten movements. His father, a carpenter in Chicago, had taught him the basics of woodworking in his teens, skills he had deemed useless in his corporate career. Now, those memories were returning like a dormant gift awakening. He spent the afternoon working on the chair, feeling a peculiar satisfaction as he watched the pieces fit together perfectly, the aroma of wood filling the small space. As he sanded and adjusted, his mind, previously tormented by spreadsheets and crises, entered a state of tranquil flow. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about debts or failures, only about the wood beneath his hands. Sofia arrived and was surprised to see him completely absorbed in his work. "I didn't know you had this talent," she commented, observing the restored chair. The genuine praise, not for his power or wealth, but for something his hands had created, brought a different warmth to Arthur's face. It was the pride of a job well done, not of a deal successfully closed. That night, Arthur bought some basic tools with his last money. As he organized the small workspace in the corner of his room, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: enthusiasm. Carpentry wasn't just a distraction. It was a bridge to a part of himself he had abandoned in his race for success, and perhaps the seed of a new beginning. Daily interaction with Sofia showed Arthur a world of values he was unaware of. He saw her lend money she barely had to a colleague in need, offer her time to help others, and honor her word even when it was inconvenient. These small actions spoke more about her character than any million-dollar transaction he had ever made. In a poignant episode, Sofia turned down a lucrative job offer because she was suspicious of the client's intentions. "Some doors that close are blessings," she calmly explained when Arthur questioned her decision. He, who had always measured opportunities by financial return, was beginning to understand that there were prices not worth paying, especially the price of his own integrity. Arthur began to realize how his old relationships were based on transactions, while the ordinary people around him built bonds based on trust and loyalty. The baker who gave him bread yesterday when he was short of money, the neighbor who offered him a cup of coffee. These small gestures of human connection were worth more than all the expensive dinners of his previous life. The most powerful lesson came when Sofia said, "Money can buy comfort, Arthur, but it doesn't buy peace." The phrase echoed in his mind as he worked in his carpentry shop, creating something tangible with his own hands. Little by little, he was learning that the most important values couldn't be quoted on the stock market, but were traded in the silent marketplace of the human soul. The nights in the small workshop became a kind of therapy for Arthur. While sanding the wood, he also sanded away the layers of arrogance and self-deception he had accumulated over the years. Each movement of the chisel was a confrontation with old choices, each precise adjustment a metaphor for the readjustment his life needed. The workshop smelled of new wood and the possibility of rebirth. He began to understand that his obsessive pursuit of wealth had been an escape from the memory of his working-class parents who never had anything, from the fear of being insignificant, from the vulnerability of simply being human. The boy who dreamed of making a difference hadn't disappeared. He had simply been lost under piles of financial reports and endless meetings. Recognizing this brought a painful relief. During a particularly reflective early morning, Arthur wrote a long letter to himself, listing all the mistakes he had made, the unfair dismissals, the distorted priorities, the people he had hurt. Instead of burning the document as he had intended, he kept it in a drawer, a testament to his failings, but also to the beginning of his acceptance. When the sun rose that morning, Arthur looked at himself in the mirror and whispered, "I forgive myself." The words sounded strange coming from his mouth, but they were true. It wasn't a forgiveness that absolved him of his mistakes, but one that freed him to learn from them. The relentless pursuit of wealth had blinded him to what truly mattered, but now he was willing to see again. Arthur began to notice things that had previously been invisible to him. The weariness in the shoulders of the delivery man carrying his wooden packages, the concern in the supermarket cashier's voice when a customer's card was declined, the silent resignation of the homeless people he had previously ignored. His world expanded beyond his own problems. He offered help to a young man who was trying to set up a small carpentry workshop in his garage, teaching him techniques he had learned from his father. Seeing the gleam in the young man's eyes when a joint came together perfectly, Arthur felt a genuine connection that no million-dollar deal had ever provided. He was discovering the joy of contributing without expecting anything in return. Sofia watched, moved, as Arthur developed a patience he had never shown in business. He now listened to the stories of ordinary people, the doorman with health problems, the seamstress with children in college, not out of politeness but out of genuine interest. His empathy, once an atrophied muscle, began to strengthen with each meaningful conversation. One Sunday, Arthur volunteered at a local shelter, not for publicity, but because he genuinely wanted to help. Serving food and listening to stories, he understood that the real battles weren't fought in boardrooms, but in the silent struggles of ordinary people for dignity. For the first time, he felt he was making the difference he had always dreamed of. The rosewood table that Arthur created for an elderly neighbor was his first paid job. When she placed the bills in his hand, a modest but hard-earned sum, his hands trembled slightly. That money had a different weight. It represented hours of careful work, attention to detail, and the satisfaction of solving a real problem for someone. The lady, Donna Esther, ran her fingers over the smooth surface of the wood, her eyes welling with tears. "My grandfather had a table just like this," she whispered. At that moment, Arthur understood that he wasn't just selling a piece of furniture, but memories, comfort, a piece of everyday beauty. The customer's emotion was worth more than any profit. He used some of the money to buy more wood and better tools, but kept some bills as souvenirs. That night, looking at those banknotes on his workbench, he felt a pride that no million in his bank account had ever given him. It was the satisfaction of a craftsman who sees his work valued, not for its price, but for its meaning. When other residents of the building began ordering small repairs and parts, Arthur realized he was building something more valuable than his previous empire, the trust of the community. Every compliment, every recommendation, every smile of satisfaction was a brick in a new foundation, this time built on honest work and genuine connections. It was Sofia who suggested that Arthur attend a support group for recovering entrepreneurs. Reluctantly, he showed up at a church room on the east side, expecting to find bitter failures. Instead, he found stories that echoed his own, men and women who had lost fortunes but were rediscovering their worth beyond their net worth. At the first meeting, Arthur listened to a former real estate tycoon talk about his new life as a math teacher. "I teach teenagers that failure isn't the end," the man said, with a calm smile that Arthur couldn't quite comprehend. The stories followed one after another, a banker who opened a bakery, an heiress who became a therapist, each narrative a lesson in resilience. When it was his turn to speak, the words came out hesitantly at first, but soon flowed like a river that had been dammed up for a long time. He talked about his fall, about Sofia, about the carpentry shop. In sharing his vulnerability, something strange happened. He felt stronger, not weaker. The understanding eyes around him created a safe space he had never known in the boardrooms. Arthur became a regular at the weekly meetings. There, he wasn't the disgraced former millionaire, but simply Arthur, the carpenter. The advice they exchanged on running small businesses was valuable, but the real treasure was the moral support. For the first time since bankruptcy, he felt he belonged to something genuine, based not on self-interest but on shared experiences. Running a small workshop was a completely different challenge than managing a corporate empire. Arthur discovered that every dollar counted viscerally when he was the one buying the wood, cleaning the place, and dealing directly with customers. Sofia patiently taught him how to price his work, manage inventory, and plan cash flow, basic skills he had never needed to master before. He made simple mistakes that made him blush. He bought too much wood that ended up warping, underestimated the time needed for projects, forgot to include overhead costs in his budgets. Each misstep was a lesson in humility, a reminder that large-scale success didn't automatically make him competent in day-to-day operations. Gradually, however, Arthur developed a practical efficiency he had never possessed as CEO. He learned to negotiate prices with suppliers, to value his time without overcharging, and to wisely reinvest profits. His analytical mind, previously focused on billion-dollar acquisitions, was now dedicated to improving simple processes that made his small business sustainable. The biggest lesson came when he realized that good management wasn't about maximizing profits, but about creating real value. His furniture solved concrete needs. His work brought beauty to ordinary homes. His business supported not only him, but also local suppliers. It was a modest but genuine ecosystem, something his previous empire had never been. The first spontaneous compliment from a client touched Arthur in a surprising way. "I've never seen such well-done work," a woman said about the crib he had created for her grandson. Arthur blushed like a teenager, murmuring thanks. That genuine feedback, not motivated by self-interest or fear, began to rebuild his self-esteem brick by brick. Each successfully completed project was a concrete victory against his self-doubt. When he saw his creations in people's homes, a dining table being used for family gatherings, a bookshelf housing beloved books, he felt part of their lives in a way that the impersonal products of his corporation never allowed. His identity was being redefined through work well done. Sofia watched the transformation with admiration. The arrogant man she had known was giving way to someone more authentic, who no longer needed titles or possessions to validate himself. Arthur began to speak confidently about his workshop, his projects, his plans, not with the arrogance of before, but with the serene confidence of someone who knows his true worth. When a local newspaper published a small article about the Brooklyn carpenter with an executive past, Arthur felt a different kind of pride than he had experienced with Forbes articles. This one wasn't about his wealth, but about his story of overcoming adversity. His self-esteem no longer depended on numbers in a bank account, but on customer satisfaction and the respect of a community that saw him for who he was, not what he had. Arthur began noticing the leftover pieces of wood accumulating in his small workshop, beautiful pieces that would otherwise be discarded due to lack of use. It was then that he conceived his first line of sustainable furniture, creating benches, shelves, and small tables from these materials that others considered waste. Each piece carried the story of the wood that composed it, a perfect metaphor for its own reconstruction. He partnered with a local nursing home, hiring retirees with manual skills to help finish the furniture. The elderly, many of them former carpenters or joiners, found not only a source of supplemental income, but a renewed purpose. Arthur watched with emotion as the work restored the sparkle to the eyes of those men and women whom society considered disposable. Sofia helped him develop a business model where part of the profits was reinvested in training programs for young people in the community. The workshop became more than a business. It was a social project that generated jobs, promoted sustainability, and valued traditional knowledge. Arthur discovered that he could make a difference in a more significant way than he had ever imagined possible. When a client praised not only the beauty of a piece of furniture, but its sustainable history, Arthur understood that he had finally found his legacy. He would not be remembered for his corporate buildings, but for furniture that told stories of transformation, of the wood, of the people who created them, and of the man himself who had rediscovered that true luxury lies not in what is accumulated, but in what is shared. The invitation came through an old contact, a former investor of Arthur's who proposed a lucrative partnership. The man offered access to tropical woods of dubious origin at ridiculously low prices, allowing Arthur to produce furniture with extraordinary profit margins. "No one needs to know the origin," the investor whispered during lunch at an expensive restaurant that Arthur no longer frequented. Arthur felt the temptation physically, a chill down his spine followed by a flush in his face. The mentioned sum would solve all his financial difficulties at once. He could pay off his remaining debts, expand the workshop, perhaps even regain some material comfort. For a moment, He found himself accepting the offer, justifying it by saying that everyone does it in the business world. But upon returning to his workshop and seeing the faces of the elderly men who worked with him, the temptation dissipated. How could he look into the eyes of those men who showed him photos of proud grandchildren if he were betraying the values he had struggled so hard to learn? How would he explain to Sofia that he had traded his newfound integrity for easy money? The offer, which had previously seemed like a solution, now appeared to be a trap. That night, Arthur declined the offer by email, copying Sofia. The words flowed more easily than he expected, as if his soul already knew the right answer even before his conscious mind. Upon clicking send, he felt not regret, but a profound peace, the silent confirmation that his transformation was real and irreversible. In the days following his refusal, Arthur faced a crisis of doubt. What if this was his only chance to recover a fraction of the comfort he had lost? What if his idealistic refusal condemned him to a life of unnecessary hardship? The temptations of the past whispered in his ears, questioning whether it was worth being ethical in a world that seemed to reward just the opposite. Sofia, sensing his inner turmoil, took him for a walk across the Brooklyn Bridge at dusk. "Easy wealth always exacts high interest later," she said, observing the Manhattan buildings where Arthur had once reigned. "The price of your soul is always greater than any profit." The metaphor resonated with him, for he understood so well about interest and hidden costs. Arthur realized that this decision defined much more than his financial future. It defined the man he would choose to be. Easy wealth represented a regression to his former self, while integrity, even with its difficulties, represented the person he had fought to become. The choice was between the Arthur he was and the Arthur he could be. When a client praised his transparency about the sustainable origin of his wood, Arthur felt confirmed that he had made the right choice, that clients' trust was worth more than the dubious profit he had refused. He finally understood that some values are priceless, and that true wealth lies in being able to look in the mirror every morning and respect the person you see reflected. Rejecting the unethical proposal had immediate consequences. Without that capital injection, Arthur had to postpone the workshop expansion he had so carefully planned. He continued working in his modest space, accepting that growth would come more slowly, but in a clean and sustainable way. Each piece of furniture he created under these conditions now carried the added value of preserved integrity. Sofia watched with admiration as Arthur handled financial difficulties without bitterness or regret. He adapted his designs, found local suppliers with fair prices, and patiently explained to clients why his furniture cost a little more, due to sustainable materials and ethically paid labor. His transparency earned respect where it might have previously generated resistance. In a gesture that surprised them both, the elderly men who worked with him offered to temporarily reduce their fees until their financial situation improved. "You treated us with dignity when no one else did," said one of them, a former factory worker from a factory that had closed. Arthur, moved, refused the offer, but understood that he had built something more valuable than money: genuine loyalty. The sacrifice brought an unexpected reward. His story began to circulate among interior designers who valued fair trade. New clients arrived not for the price, but for the principles. Arthur discovered that the market, contrary to all his previous beliefs, rewarded integrity when it was genuine. His business grew at just the right pace, without compromising his values. When the opportunity to rent a larger space arose, Arthur hesitated. Demons from the past whispered about failure, about debt, about losing everything again. He spent 3 nights reviewing numbers, projecting scenarios, questioning his abilities. The ghost of his disastrous cryptocurrency investment haunted his decision-making process, a painful reminder of his past recklessness. Sofia gently encouraged him, showing him how conservative and realistic his projections were. "Fear is natural, Arthur," she said. "The important thing is not to let it make the decisions for you." She pointed out how his management skills had matured, how he knew every aspect of his business now, something that had never happened in his corporate empire. It was while observing the elderly working in the cramped space that Arthur found his courage. They deserved better conditions, and their clients deserved a proper showroom. His motivation was no longer profit for profit's sake, but creating a dignified environment for everyone involved. This fundamental difference dispelled his fears. He wasn't taking risks out of blind ambition, but investing for a clear purpose. As he signed the lease, his hands were steady. There was fear, yes, But it was a different kind of fear. Not the paralyzing panic of before, but the responsible awareness of someone who understands the risks and still moves forward. Arthur trusted not only in his abilities, but in the value of what he was building. The new workshop represented not a gamble, but the natural harvest of a job well done. Arthur's first act in the new workshop was to create a comfortable space for his elderly employees. Ergonomic chairs, adequate lighting, scheduled breaks. He studied their specific needs and adapted the work environment, something he had never done in his previous company, where employees were just numbers on a cost spreadsheet. When one of the elderly employees fell ill, Arthur not only maintained his pay, but also visited him regularly in the hospital. "Your family to us," the man said, holding his hand affectionately. The scene deeply touched Arthur, who had never visited a sick employee in his years as CEO. That was HR's job. Now he understood that caring for people wasn't an operational cost, but the core of any true enterprise. Sofia helped him implement a profit-sharing system, where everyone received a percentage of sales above a certain target. The results were evident not only in the finances, but also in the sparkle in the eyes of those men and women who truly felt part of the business. The quality of work improved, attention to detail increased, and the environment became light and collaborative. Customers often commented on the workshop's special atmosphere, the quiet sound of tools, the friendly conversations, the palpable respect in the air. Arthur realized he was creating not just furniture, but a model of how business could be: humane, fair, and compassionate. His true transformation manifested itself not in words, but in how he treated every person he met. Arthur viewed his new workshop not as a space that generated profit, but as a place that created value. Each piece of furniture that came out of there carried stories, from the reclaimed wood, to the experienced hands that worked it, to the families that would receive it. Success was no longer measured in millions, but in the positive impact his work had on the community and the environment. He began training young people from the community in basic carpentry, offering scholarships to those who couldn't afford vocational courses. One of his apprentices, a young man who had dropped out of school, got his first formal job thanks to the skills he acquired in the workshop. Seeing the pride in the eyes of the young man and his family gave Arthur a satisfaction that no million-dollar bonus could ever provide. Sofia watched as Arthur found joy in small triumphs: a client's compliment, a project completed perfectly, the smile on an elderly person's face upon receiving their payment. He had discovered that true success lay not in accumulating wealth, but in the positive contribution one made to the world. His measure of prosperity now included collective well-being and moral legacy. When a major newspaper published an article about the entrepreneur who traded Wall Street for sustainable woodworking, Arthur read the words without vanity, but with gratitude for the opportunity to inspire others. His story wasn't about fall and rise, but about transformation and redemption. True success, he understood, is building something that remains even after you're gone. On an ordinary day, while helping a customer load a cabinet into his old pickup truck, Arthur looked at his reflection in the vehicle's window and didn't see a bankrupt millionaire, but a carpenter at the peak of his abilities. His hands, now calloused from honest work, told a different story from those that merely signed checks. He was, finally, who he had always been meant to be. People in the community no longer called him Mr. King or the ex-tycoon. He was simply Arthur the Carpenter, or Art, as they affectionately nicknamed him. He responded naturally, without nostalgia for the pompous titles. The identity he had built with sweat and wood was infinitely more comfortable than the fantasy of power he had worn for so long. When he accidentally ran into a former business partner in a cafe, the man looked at his simple clothes with pity. "How are you, Arthur? Still in that little workshop?" Arthur smiled genuinely. "I'm great, building things that matter." The answer came effortlessly because it was true. Bankruptcy had freed him from the need to play a role that never suited him. That night, in his modest but cozy apartment, Arthur realized that the most valuable wealth he possessed was the right to be himself. The millionaire's mask had fallen to reveal a complete man. Flawed, yes, but authentic. The new identity was not a lesser version of the previous one, but an expanded version that included compassion, humility, and purpose. The reconciliation began with a timid invitation for his sister to visit the workshop. She arrived wary, remembering her arrogant brother who had canceled Thanksgiving dinner for a business meeting. But seeing him teaching carpentry to young people, with patience and dedication, Her heart began to melt. "You've changed, Arthur," she whispered, hugging him for the first time in years. His teenage nephew, who had always seen him as a distant and inaccessible figure, began attending the workshop on Saturdays. Arthur taught him how to make a chair, imparting not only carpentry techniques but also life lessons about patience, perseverance, and attention to detail. The boy, who had previously barely looked him in the eye, now sincerely admired him. Family gatherings returned, but with a different quality. Arthur no longer dominated the conversations with stories of his financial successes, but listened attentively to others, genuinely interested in their lives. He brought simple gifts he had made with his own hands: a cutting board for his sister, a picture frame for his mother, gifts that were valued for their meaning, not their price. One Sunday afternoon, while helping his mother in the garden, something he hadn't done since adolescence, she took his calloused hand and said, "My son has come home." Arthur understood that she wasn't talking about his physical location, but about his return to his essence. The family reconnection was the most precious gift of his journey, the certainty that no matter what happened, he had a safe haven where he was loved for who he was, not for what he possessed. Arthur began receiving requests to speak at business schools and entrepreneurship programs. Instead of prepared speeches about financial success, he shared his story of downfall and rebuilding. "Failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it," he told audiences of young entrepreneurs who listened attentively, surprised by the brutal honesty of a former tycoon. He created a foundation that offered mentorship to struggling small business owners, especially those who, like him in the past, prioritized profits over values. His approach was practical and compassionate. He didn't judge the mistakes of others, for he knew all too well the bitter taste of his own errors. Each entrepreneur he helped redirect their business represented a way of repairing his own past mistakes. Sofia became his partner in this mission, bringing her accounting and ethical knowledge to the project. Together, they developed programs that taught sustainable management and corporate social responsibility. Arthur saw with satisfaction how his painful experience could serve to prevent others from making the same mistakes, transforming his troubled past into a tool for positive change. Arthur's story began to circulate beyond business circles. Ordinary people wrote to him thanking him for inspiring them to pursue their dreams with integrity, even when the easy path presented itself. He discovered that his true legacy lay not in the furniture he created, but in the lives he touched through his journey of overcoming adversity, a legacy that no amount of money could buy. The inauguration of the newly expanded workshop wasn't a high society event, but a community celebration. Arthur opened the doors to neighbors, clients, friends, and family. The workshop was decorated with furniture they had created together, and the aroma of wood and homemade food filled the air. It was a celebration not of a business, but of a life rebuilt. The senior citizens who worked with Arthur were the guests of honor. Each of them received a Master Craftsman certificate and a symbolic share of next year's profits. One of them, with tears in his eyes, said he had never felt so valued in his entire professional life. The scene moved everyone present, perfectly encapsulating the spirit of what Arthur had built. Sofia spoke briefly, reminding everyone how the workshop represented much more than a workspace. It was a testament to the possibility of starting over with dignity after failure. "Arthur hasn't just built furniture these past few years," she said. "He's built an example." Her eyes met his through the crowd, and a silent understanding passed between them. When Arthur cut the symbolic ribbon, made from fabric scraps donated by customers, he did so not alone, but accompanied by everyone who had been part of his transformation. The expanded workshop represented not ambition, but community, not luxury, but sustenance, not ostentation, but purpose. It was the tangible symbol that the future he now envisioned was brighter than any golden past. On a quiet Sunday, Arthur and Sofia went for a picnic in the same park he used to watch from his old penthouse. As they shared a simple meal, he realized he was happier in that moment than at any expensive dinner in his past. True wealth, he understood, lay in the freedom to be authentic, in the peace of a clear conscience, in the luxury of a light heart. He observed couples strolling with children, friends laughing together, elderly people chatting on benches, common scenes that had previously been invisible to him. Each of those scenes represented the true treasure of human life: connection, love, friendship, belonging. These were the coins of the kingdom that truly mattered, and he finally possessed them in abundance. Sofia pointed to her old building in the distance. "Do you miss it?" Arthur thought for a moment and answered honestly, "I miss the person I thought I was, but not the person I've become. Adversity had taught him that some losses are gains in disguise, and that true transformation happens when we exchange empty values for profound meanings. That late afternoon, walking hand in hand with Sofia towards the sunset, Arthur understood that his journey of redemption was complete. He had lost a fortune, but he had found himself. True wealth lay not in what one accumulated, but in what one shared, not in what one possessed, but in who one was, not in material comfort, but in the ability to transform adversity into learning and pain into compassion. The last vestige of bitterness dissolved when Arthur encountered the former employee responsible for the embezzlement at his company. The man, now ill and ruined, approached him at a craft fair with pleading eyes. Instead of retaliating, Arthur offered him a glass of water and listened to his story of gambling debts and despair. The hatred Arthur had harbored simply vanished. In the following days, Arthur offered the man work in the workshop, supervised and doing simple tasks. Everyone deserves a second chance, he explained to Sofia, who initially hesitated. I received mine myself. The gesture was not naivety, but a profound understanding that forgiveness liberates both the one who forgives and the one who is forgiven. It was the final step in his own healing. When the former employee, with tears in his eyes, thanked him for the opportunity to redeem himself, Arthur felt a centuries-old weight lift from his shoulders. Forgiving others proved to be the final step toward forgiving himself completely. He understood that everyone carries their own battles, and that a mistake, however bad, does not eternally define a person. The act of forgiveness became the cornerstone of his new life. Arthur had freed himself not only from the weight of the past, but from the need to judge, condemn, or hold grudges. The space previously occupied by these negative emotions was now filled with gratitude for the second chance, for the people who supported him, for the simple life he had discovered to be so rich. Arthur's story became a silent beacon for many. Businessmen in crisis sought his guidance not for his past credentials, but for his transformative journey. He would listen for hours, sharing not magic formulas, but hard truths about humility, integrity, and the courage to start over when necessary. A local university created a case study about his transformation, used in business ethics classes. Arthur visited the classes periodically, answering questions with a transparency that impressed the students. I'm not a hero, he insisted, just a man who learned that success without meaning is the greatest failure. Sofia discreetly documented her journey, creating an archive that would become an inspiring book. But more important than the written record were the lives Arthur touched daily. The young man he prevented from making an ethical mistake, the family that reconciled inspired by his story, the businesses that became more humane following his example. The true measure of his redemption was manifested in small gestures, in the patience with which he taught, in the integrity with which he worked, in the compassion with which he helped. Arthur no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. His life had become his most eloquent testimony, living proof that transformation is possible when we let go of who we were to become who we can be. Arthur established strict work schedules that included lunch breaks with Sofia and weekends dedicated to his personal life. The obsession with work that had previously defined his existence had given way to a healthy rhythm, where the business sustained his life, not consumed it. He discovered that productivity increases when you value rest. His old hobbies, reading, hiking, even cooking, gradually returned to his life. The workshop was part of who he was, not his entirety. This rediscovery of pleasure in small things brought a lightness that money could never buy. Arthur laughed more, slept better, and woke up with genuine anticipation for the day ahead. Sofia and he cultivated a relationship based on presence, not expensive gifts or lavish dinners. Their favorite nights were those spent at home, talking about their days, planning the future, or simply enjoying the comfortable silence of two people at peace with each other. It was an intimacy that Arthur had never known in his previous relationships. The balance he found was reflected in every aspect of his life: work that satisfied without consuming, relationships that enriched without draining, a purpose that motivated without obsession. Arthur had understood that true well-being comes not from excess in one area, but from harmony among all of them. His life, once a desert of excess, had become a balanced garden where everything flourished in just the right measure. Arthur looked at the plans for his new line of modular and sustainable furniture, pieces that could grow and adapt to changes in families, reducing waste and consumerism. His designs reflected his own journey, the beauty of transformation, the elegance of simplicity, the wisdom of adaptability. Each creation carried his philosophy of life. He envisioned a network of community workshops across the country, where people could learn carpentry while rebuilding their own lives. The model he had developed, ethical, sustainable, and socially responsible, could be replicated, creating not only furniture but opportunities for redemption for others who, like him, needed a second chance. Sofia and he now dreamed of being partners in every sense, in business, in life, in their mission to inspire a more conscious world. Their plans included a larger foundation, empowerment programs for ex-convicts, and even a small line of affordable furniture for low-income families. Their dreams were rooted in compassion, not ambition. On the evening of his one-year anniversary in his new workshop, Arthur looked at everything he had built and felt a profound peace. The future he envisioned was not one of empires or fortunes, but of legacy and meaning. His sustainable furniture represented more than products. It was a metaphor for a world where people and the planet mattered more than profits, where awareness and compassion would guide progress. Arthur's story shows us that true success lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we share. Not in the heights we reach, but in the depth to which we transform ourselves. His journey from millionaire to carpenter is not about falling and rising. It's about finding the courage to exchange a life of appearances for an existence of meaning. How many of us are trapped in gilded cages, prioritizing bank account numbers over genuine connections? How many sofas are out there offering help that our pride prevents us from accepting? The invitation that Arthur's story makes to us is simple, yet profound. Do we have the courage to let go of who we think we should be in order to become who we truly are? Your transformation begins now. Don't wait to lose everything to find your purpose. What first step will you take today towards a more meaningful life? What dormant talent awaits you? What relationship needs your forgiveness? What dream did you abandon in the rush for success? The journey back to yourself is the only one that truly matters. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications because every week we share real stories of people who found the courage to transform themselves. Your story of redemption could be the next one to inspire someone to start over.